go ahead and move on to Dr. Mobley, but we'll come back to Trish later on. But Dr. Mobley has practiced medicine both here in Springfield and out in Washington State, where he actually wrote recommendations for medical cannabis, so he can handle the discussion about the science of cannabis and what it does to your body far beyond anything that any of the rest of us on this panel can. So, Dr. Mobley.
Thank you.
I'll the mic.
Sure, okay. Thanks. So I'm GIL MOBLEY. I have Dr. Gil's immediate care. I'm a board-certified residency trained emergency trauma doc. Worked the ERs here for a while now. I have my own freestanding emergency trauma center. About 10 years ago, I sold it and went out west. Worked the ERs out there, and while I was out there, some elderly folks came to me asking me to write their medical cannabis authorizations. I'm a Missouri guy. I didn't know much about it, looked into it, found there's a huge need for a doctor to do it in a reputable manner that would stand behind them and show up in court if they became challenged. So that became my forte pretty much, and I would spend an hour with these patients that had the medical records that needed thoroughly documenting. The first part of that hour I would document their medical issues to make sure I could get them out if they got in trouble. For the second hour I would talk to them about the medical legal issues, what they were entitled to, and et cetera, but thoroughly documented. In that period of time I learned a lot about cannabis and a lot about the toxicology, and pretty much became a DUI expert with driving under the influence of cannabis as far as arguing cases in court, seeing where impairment is and how we define impairment. But long story short, I don't do that much anymore out in Washington State. The law's changed, of course. It's legal out there, but for most cannabis patients would still rather grow their 15 plants and have their 24 ounces. So it is still a thriving business out there. It got too hot in the kitchen for me, basically. But I began looking at the legalization process and understand that really I think the way to go is probably legalization of cannabis. I would recommend, John, that we go full legalization even before medical cannabis in this state. There are some reasons we can get into over a beer perhaps later. But I am fully endorsing medical cannabis as well. We'll get to this in just a moment, but you can no longer deny the medical utility of cannabis in a myriad of medical conditions. It is a miracle drug in MS. It stops seizures in kids and adults that other medicines cannot touch, and it is a potent anti-inflammatory. But we'll get to that in a moment. I just wanted to basically take about 7 or 8 minutes here and go over the top 10 myths that you'll likely hear from our opponents that they will bring up and try to discredit our efforts to promote the legalization of a safe substance, cannabis, or the medical uses of it. And the number one myth that you'll usually oftentimes hear is that cannabis is a gateway drug. Well, it's not, and the research is clear. Right there's a stack of research. In a moment, my physician assistant will bring in more that's hot off the press that we have copies of you made. Actually, you can pick up a business card of mine, and I will get you the references if you like, rather than making all these copies. But the research is clear. Cannabis is not a gateway drug, and the only strong correlations we've found that clearly leads to harder drug use are the psychosocial personal traits of delinquency and deviancy. I'll circulate one of the best studies that debunks the gateway theory is from the American Journal of Psychiatry. Now, particularly for cannabis, the exposure to the black market where harder drugs are available, like the guy may have some mushrooms too and try this crystal type stuff, the exposure to the black market where harder drugs are available really poses a much greater risk for the progression of drugs as opposed to it being a gateway drug. Well, it is. The pushers, pushers, the same stuff. That's not happening in Colorado now. You're not going to find mushrooms. You're not going to find Adderall at the same places that are pushing or that are selling the cannabis out there that's regulated. Myth number 2, marijuana is a risky drug. No one in this room is telling anybody to smoke marijuana. It trashes the lungs. It has bad effects on the short-term memory. That's why it should not be tolerated in the workplace. And it's even addictive in some degree of people. Only 10%, we'll get to that in a moment. But having said all that, marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. Hands down. No one's really dying from a THC overdose. You can't say that about Tylenol. You can't say that about Advil or anything on the cold aisle in your drugstore. Cannabis is safer than alcohol, and it's been prevailing opinion for a couple of decades now. In the stack that I can forward you if you'd like, you'll find an editorial from Lancet, one of the world's best and most respected medical journals. Lancet says if you looked at the long-term effects of cannabis on society and the body, and compare that to the long-term effects of alcohol on society and the body, at 10 to 1, alcohol is worse on the body and society as long as the long-term effects. Two wrongs don't make a right, but we need to keep things in perspective. JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, had the same type article that confirmed the same thing a decade later. With this in mind, let's just revisit this gateway theory for a moment. So when teenagers hear the clergy, the scoutmasters, the cops say, you know, marijuana is dangerous, it's addictive, because if they try it, they go, wow, it's not as impairing as they say, it's not like this. As they say, they think we're also lying to them about K2 and bath salts, meth, and cocaine. That is what makes it a gateway drug, thanks to the law enforcement's lies that they put out. The truth is, there's absolutely no correlation between casual smoking and progression to other issues, drugs. Myth number 3: there are more carcinogens in cannabis smoke than in tobacco smoke. The truth is, there's no correlation between smoking cannabis and lung cancer. And I've had a hard time putting my brain around this, but apparently, according to the most latest research, and this is Robin Yost, my physician assistant, thanks for bringing me these latest, perfect timing. Exactly. The latest research, actually, if you go to the Society of Forensic Toxicology, they're talking about the THC pharmacology and how it interrupts anti-inflammatory pathways, how it interrupts neurological seizure pathways, and how it interrupts anti-cancer. The same pathways that anti-cancer drugs interrupt the neogenesis, the making of cancer molecules, how that interrupts it. THC does the same thing. These scientists get so excited they almost seize up there at the podium showing that, look, where is this? Where do you see this? You see this in the brain. This is the same thing that's in anti-inflammatory. Where do you see this? You see this in gabapentin, the same thing that's in the anti-inflammatory. Where do you see this? You see this in the anti-cancer stuff. Long story short, the myth number 3 is that it causes cancer. Guess what? It appears to stop cancer. It took me a long time. I thought that was all stoner rhetoric, but last October, the Society of Forensic Toxicologists at Orlando, they said that about THC, and we about fell over. Number 4, we're a myth. Traffic fatalities with cannabis went up hundreds of percent once Colorado legalized medical cannabis. A lot of studies are getting ready to come out on this, and again, this is my area of expertise. But let me warn you, when you look at these studies that they're quoting right now, even this month, they're quoting carboxy-THC that hangs out for 6 weeks to 2 months after you smoke, not the active ingredient that dissipates within a few hours and overnight if you're just a daily user. That's what you need to correlate intoxication with, and we talk about levels if we want to go there later. Myth number 5. Cannabis is different from alcohol because people use alcohol, use it for the taste. They use cannabis to get high. You know, I don't know about the people that y'all hang out with and drink. Most of them use it for the effect. And I only say that because there's one officer that shows his face in some of these debates, and I just like to discredit that for crime. And I love it when it becomes his turn, and I'd like to hit the first 8 of his 10 points, and he's got 10 minutes, he's got nothing left to say. So I just simply point that in and lighten up my 5 golden rings, myth number 5. Myth number 6, there's no such thing as medical marijuana. Our opponents will often say, well, I talked about the anti-inflammatory effects, I talked about the anti-seizure effects, and I talked about the neurological repair and multiple sclerosis. And I saw it firsthand in my patients. To recommend medical cannabis, my patients had to have a qualifying medical condition that charts up the wazoo to prove it. But cannabis, number 1, in my own book, had to work better than anything else that they had tried, and they had to have a doctor continuing to try alternative treatments, so they didn't want to keep them on it forever. So it had to work better than anything else, had to tolerate the side effects, you know, did it make you drowsy, did it cause some impairment, does it make you hungry, does it make you giddy, or, you know, does it tolerate the side effects, and do it in a manner that doesn't harm the body. Smoking trashes the lungs, devaporize, so I make sure my patients understand the benefit of vaporization is that there are no carcinogens, or there are less carcinogens, there's no products of combustion. The The product is aerosolized with some hot air, and the THC vaporizes into a harmless vapor, so there's no products of combustion, therefore substantially less carcinogens and no tar. That's why I encourage my patients to do it in a manner that wouldn't harm the body, than vaporization or baking. Baking's problematic. You have the same plant have widely different THC levels from a bottom leaf to something that's relatively new and old, depending on how it's cured and all that type of thing, how much light it's getting. You don't know how much of that leached out into the butter or whatever your medium is. You don't know how fast that's going to be absorbed, and it could be on a milk and steak stomach-laden stomach, and they take forever to go through versus empty stomach, and it's going to be a real big spike. There are way too many variables. You'd be very careful with that. As we're running in Washington State and Colorado right now, the whole edible thing is scary. But still, you're not going to trash your lungs. But still, I think vaporization is probably the best way, and what I recommend my cannabis patients, if they came back to me for a renewal of the authorization, I want them to show me that they had invested in a vaporizer, because it's one of my 3 tenets. Works better than anything else. Tolerate the side effects, and do it in a manner that doesn't hurt the body. Then I could recommend medical cannabis, and patients swore by it. Many of my patients, like I told you, some elderly patients came to me. They were asking if they could grow their own so they could juice it. They would juice the raw product, and that's really where you can get the anti-inflammatory effect of it. It's no pyrolysis. There was no psychoactivation of the THC. Therefore, they weren't getting the buzz, they weren't getting the high, but they were getting the anti-inflammatory effects of juicing the raw bud. There are actually some younger patients of mine that have rheumatoid arthritis and some debilitating, crippling things that would actually juice the raw bud as well. And there's people with terrible cramps in the legs that swear by the cream. It's amazing type stuff that needs to be much further developed. Number 6, running short on time, right in an hour. There's no such thing as medical marijuana. We talked about that. Cannabis, number 7, cannabis causes a drop in IQ. You can in kids under 21. That's why no one here is saying, allow kids 21. As a matter of fact, I recommend to John and anyone in the legalization thing that we have to take all the funds and put it all on prevention of kids using it less than 21 years old. It can't cause a problem. But the studies, and I can forward them to you as well, and Rob brought them a moment ago, says that no, it does not cause a drop in IQ in adults. Number 8, cannabis causes schizophrenia. It doesn't. It can turn a person, a schizophrenic, into a little exacerbation, but oftentimes helps the symptoms I've heard, seen, and heard some first-hand accounts. Number 9, cannabis is addictive. Is that a myth? Well, it's a partial truth. It can be addictive, and 10% of the people can have a rather significant withdrawal type syndrome of irritability, sleeplessness, not seizures, not withdrawal where you're going to have physiological problems, not even in blood pressure, not even physiological, but it's psychological, it's an irritability, and some of the sleeplessness can come from the rebound of REM, rapid eye movement, where you dream again. Because like alcohol, cannabis can suppress the REM sleep. You have a rebound, so if you stop smoking for a few days, it's like going to the movies. The dreams are wildly vivid all of a sudden. Well, you can wake up often with a sweat. Oh my God, I really dreamed about what I just did. So, it can be very active, and because of that, there is some withdrawal. But let's talk about for just a moment what addiction is, because it can be addictive in 10% of the people, so you understand it's part of my medical responsibility. It's a craving. When the stimulus is gone, you crave it. Continuation despite negative consequences. With cannabis, it might be the cost, it might be the smell, it might be that you're late for work, it might be that you're always trying to find it or whatever, or hide it, whatever. A continuation despite negative consequences, and a compulsion. You continue it. Continued compulsion. You want it despite it not even being there. It's like going to the refrigerator, opening the door when you know it's the 5th time this hour you check there's nothing there, but you open the refrigerator door anyway. It's like in a room where we're bored and nothing to do. We have nothing on an iPhone. We pick it up to see what's going to go on. That's the compulsion. Watch for those things, and you may have a problem.